There's been a lot of concern about the state of the movie business over the last several years, certainly exacerbated by the pandemic, a couple of big labor stoppages a couple of years ago. So the movie business isn't as strong as it once was. It is not as central to culture as it once was. It is not dying. We have two or three very popular movies in theaters right now. And perhaps more importantly, it is not dying relative to other countries. It's not as though you suddenly see movies from Europe or Asia or Latin America that are supplanting U.S. movies. The movie business is facing the same problem all over the world. U.S. movies continue to be the dominant type of movie. I think all 10 of the highest grossing movies of last year were released by U.S. studios.
When you read this post, I wonder sort of what questions it raised in your mind. I look at kind of that key line here, this proposition of 100% tariff on movies coming into our country that are produced in foreign lands. How much ambiguity is there about that language, what the president might be referring to here?
A lot. I think that, the first, frankly, my first response was like, what exactly is going on here? What, as with so many of the president's posts on social media, sort of what motivated it, which I think we answered, but also, why this is not I get wanting to address it for economic reasons. I would not describe this as a national security threat. But then it just raises a lot of questions, right? So the Hollywood studios produce a lot of their movies outside of the US. They'll film in the UK or Eastern Europe or wherever it may be. But there's still plenty of work on them done in the US, whether that is some post-production work, whether that's, there are many kind of steps in the process of making a movie. And it is true that more and more of them have left the country. But a lot is still done here. So how are you defining that, right? Are you trying to go after movies that other countries or companies from other countries are releasing, which would seem to be the implication, right? You're going after Japanese movies or Chinese movies or Indian movies. Those movies don't really make a lot of money here. Every once in a while, you'll have a breakout. Or are you trying to force U.S. companies like Disney, Warner Brothers, Universal to produce movies in the U.S. instead, which we've seen Trump attempt with some of his other policies to bring manufacturing back here, even if it's from American companies. And then there's like the added wrinkle of these global streaming services where Netflix makes a lot of movies in English, some of which are made in the United States, but they also make a lot of shows in other countries because they exist everywhere and they make movies in dozens of languages. And so there's just a lot of questions to try to unpack here. And I don't really think that Trump has the answer to them at this point, but hopefully we'll have some clarity in the next few weeks.
Just lastly here, I wanted to ask you about the incentive system that's in place here domestically and how, say, a state like Georgia or Texas, California can compete with these foreign countries. In other words, is the competition a domestic competition mostly when Hollywood's looking to make films, or do we see it playing out kind of on a global scale?
Well, there's two levels of competition, right? There are a lot of people who want to bring more production back to California specifically, because we've seen a lot of production move to places like Georgia, New York, places that have offered generous incentives to lower production. And that's all within this country, so I don't see why Trump would really care about that. In fact, he might cheer because California is not exactly the most hospitable place for him politically. Then there's the second aspect of it, which is the global part, where again, there are very generous incentives to shoot elsewhere. There are different labor environments. One of the things that Jon Voight and Stephen Paul, his manager, and others have pushed for is maybe a federal incentive that could be on top of state incentives that would make it cheaper to shoot here. How much of an impact that would have, I'm not really sure. But I do think that studios and producers would welcome the U.S. trying to be more competitive and make it more compelling to shoot here, because most people would rather shoot here if they can.